tools that that we talk about and that parents use in saving for their children's future, and some more than others are for neurotypical children and the 529, for example, and the ABLE and Special Needs Trust would be more designed for those who are not neurotypical. And I just wanted to explain a little bit about each so you can differentiate and be educated about the differences of each type and how they integrate and what they're then be able to make educated decisions about how you can save for your children's futures. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background, and that is many of your children will qualify, if they're not already, for public benefits. And those benefits can run a gamut from SSI, Supplemental Security Income, SSDI, Social Security Disability Income, and then on the medical spectrum, Medicare or Medi-Cal. And at different periods during their life, they may qualify for one, and at another time, they may qualify for another. Some of these public benefits programs look at the assets that you have. And so one of the challenges and limit your eligibility for those public benefits based on the assets that you have, based on their level of whether or not you need the assets, you need the public benefits that they're providing. So the challenge is, how do you save when they're telling you you can't have any savings? The programs that have resource limits in particular are SSI, Medi-Cal, and as part of and IHSS, and IHSS is a Medi-Cal benefit. So it's not really you think of it as a separate program and a separate benefit, but it's a benefit that comes to you through the Medi-Cal program. And these three have a $2,000 resource limit. So they're looking at the assets that your children have and say, do you have more than $2,000? And the things that they're counting are basically everything. Their savings, their checking, the investment accounts, gifts from family members that may add up over time, inheritances that they receive, including inheritances that are held in trust for them, unless it's a special kind of trust known as a special needs trust. I'm going to talk specifically about special needs trusts, but generally, unless someone in your family is predisposed to thinking about the special needs of your children and knowing that they need to do a special needs trust, they're inclined to do a trust for support. I want to support my grandchild, and so I want to put money aside for them till age 25 or till age 50 or for even their entire lifetime. And that trust for support under the SSI, Medi-Cal, and IHSS rules is an asset that is counted. So those create problems with the $2,000 resource limit. In addition, payments that you make for support and housing can reduce your child's monthly benefit for SSI, or even increase your share of cost for Medi-Cal and IHSS. So these things work against your goal of saving for your children. So what to do? Starting with the 529 education accounts. 529 refers to the section of the Internal Revenue Code that allows for the creation of education accounts. And it allows anyone to take their annual gift amount, which now is $15,000, into a Section 529 account, and that money grows like an IRA, tax-free. So we say tax-free accumulation. So it's invested in whatever someone invests, whatever they choose to invest it in. It might be a savings account, which has low income, but it's a savings account. It might be in mutual funds. It might be in stock. It might be in whatever, as creative as you want to get. Most of them are mutual funds. But all of the earnings that are coming off of that account, there is no annual taxes paid, and so the money accumulates more rapidly because there's no loss for those for paying those taxes. When the child reaches college age, these were originally developed for college expenses, and so when the child reaches college age, any withdrawals from that account, unlike an IRA, with your IRA, when you take money out, you pay tax on all of it. But with a 529 account, if you take money out for education expenses, you pay no tax. So it's tax-free withdrawals for the education expenses. If you take money out for something that's not an education expense, for the trip to Australia, then there is not only tax, but there's also a 10% penalty. So each state can have different rules about the tax-free portion. So there have been some changes to the rules for 529 accounts. The 529 accounts can now be used for up to $10,000 per year for private schools at the elementary and high school levels. That's tax-free. That withdrawal is tax-free at the federal level, but it's taxable to California taxpayers. California didn't buy into that change. And then the types of expenses that it can be used for is tuition, supplies, room and board are common at the college expense. And so there's lots of rulings that, all of that can be paid for. So the students paying out for the students' rent and food and utilities, all of that can be covered from what's been saved in the 529 account. And things like computer supplies, internet fees, books, costs for the special costs for the photography class, and any other similar expenses. So those are great tools. That's a great savings tool for a neurotypical child where you're planning that you're saving for their college. If you don't know that your child is going to be going to college, let's see if I have another, okay, miscellaneous items. I do have one more. The owner of the account is the person who created the account. So it's often the parent who's the owner. And so the parent or the grandparent, whoever set up the 529 account, maintain control of it, decides how the disbursements will be, how and when disbursements will be made. And it is counted for financial eligibility for student grants, for scholarships. The unused portion, it can remain in a 529 account indefinitely, but the portion that at some point you realize is not going to be used can be rolled over to be used by another student. And so the owner makes that decision. I have another grandchild, or I have another child who may need this money. But if the if there are no remaining children to use the money for education expenses and it's withdrawn, then it is subject to tax and a 10% penalty. And then I wanted to point out that the 529 accounts can be rolled over to an ABLE account, which we're going to talk about next. The ABLE account was patterned on this 529 idea, and it actually is in the Internal Revenue Code, and it's like 529 and a subletter D. So it's very much patterned on the 529 model. So that's the basic script for a 529 account. When it reaches the end of its useful life, either it's rolled over to someone else, or on the withdrawal, the taxes and the penalty are paid. So now I want to talk about the ABLE account. And ABLE is a new creation in the law within the last 5 years. And it stands for achieving, people spend a lot of time coming up with good acronyms, achieving a better life experience. The maximum amount that can be put into an ABLE account per beneficiary is $15,000. You can't put more than $15,000 per year per disabled child. The child has to be disabled before age 26, and you need to have some documentation and receiving benefits from the federal government of SSI or SSDI would be that documentation before age 26. And the money, so you might put 3 years, 3 consecutive years, you might put $15,000 in if you were so fortunate, and you'd have $45,000 of savings. That money, the interest off of that, again, you could put it in a savings account, a CD, a mutual fund. Most of the states have their own ABLE programs. There is a Cal ABLE, but you do not have to invest in the ABLE program that correlates to your state. So you might decide you like the Vermont ABLE program better. Maybe the fees are lower, or they have better investment options as far as you're concerned, or they have a more convenient ATM card. You know, that's a choice that you can make. But once invested, it accumulates tax-free, just like the 529, just like the IRA. And the money in the ABLE account is not counted by Medi-Cal or SSI. So it's really a savings account for a disabled person, but it's free. It's a free savings. There's nothing else that you get to have as savings that isn't counted towards your $2,000, except an ABLE account. So expenditures from an ABLE account can be used for qualified disability expenses, which is a very, very broad term. So it's defined as basic living expenses, utilities, anything for health and wellness, anything related to housing, transportation, education and training, legal expenses, assistive technology and aid, extra hours, anything that will make the person's life better. What it doesn't include is gifts to other people. That's not a qualified disability expense. But for the most part, it's understood very broadly. And as long as a withdrawal is made for a qualified disability expense, the withdrawal is not subject to income tax, and it's not treated as income by the Medi-Cal or SSI agency. So for those of you who are very familiar with SSI's very penal rules about helping someone pay for their housing expenses, if you pay for someone's housing expenses, SSI reduces their SSI benefit. They call that, you've given them some in-kind support and maintenance. The acronym is ISM. And so if you've given them some of that, then they don't need as much as of our SSI, and they reduce the SSI. Payments from an ABLE account do not have that negative repercussion. So payments in are free, no penalty. Payments out are free, no penalty. It doesn't get better than that. So even people who have special needs trusts, if they have the resources, having an ABLE account to also pay for some of the housing and utilities can really expand the pot of what they're allowed to have without reducing their SSI benefit. So like I said, each state has its own not every state, but I think 47 of the states have now. California was actually one of the slowest to finalize its ABLE plan, but many states have ABLE plans, and they differ based on what investment options you have. And some of them have basically a savings account. You can opt between a savings account or a mutual fund type of investment. Some of them are paired with well-known mutual fund companies like Vanguard, Fidelity, TIAA, CREF. Different state plans will have, as you look into them, an ATM card that the beneficiary can keep and use that as a way of accessing the funds in their ABLE account. And they also differ based on whether or not you can designate a beneficiary of what's left in the ABLE account. California does not allow you to designate a beneficiary on the ABLE account. And some people have expressed that as a disadvantage. So most people are familiar with the idea that if you have an IRA, you designate a beneficiary who will receive what's left in that IRA when you pass away. But the ABLE account in California doesn't allow you to say who would receive the balance of that account when the disabled person passes away. So it would go basically under that person's will, or it would go to their next of kin. So some other factors is contribution limits. The most you can put in is $15,000 total per year, and that's not per person who's putting it in, which is the gift tax rule. So if two people were married and they wanted to give money to their children, they could each give $15,000, and the IRS wouldn't care about that gift. But that's not the rule for ABLE accounts. The rule is based on the person receiving it. The person receiving it, your disabled child, can't receive into their ABLE account more than $15,000 per year. Okay. And the maximum for an ABLE account depends on whether the person receives SSI. If they receive SSI, SSI allows them only $100,000. I have here, it's beneficiary managed, but that's not necessarily true. If it can be managed by your disabled child, if your child is good enough to manage money and handle an ATM card. If they're not, and they have a conservator appointed, then it can be managed by a conservator. And you might still give them an ATM that they can use, and they can learn how to use the ATM card and still have access to that. And then importantly, I wanted to point out that the details of rolling over 529 education plans to ABLE accounts, they can be rolled over at the rate of $15,000 per year. So if you have a 529 plan, you can take $15,000 from the 529 each year and push it into the ABLE account. You can't take $45,000 from the 529 and put it all over in 1 year. You'd have to do it in increments of $15,000 for however many years it takes to do that. If you have a child who's not neurotypical, the ABLE account is far and away the better way to hold up to $100,000, because you can use it for education. If they go on to college and they're able to manage a college load, you haven't limited any of their options. You can use the ABLE money for education expenses. That's a qualified disability expense. Education is a qualified disability expense. So you can still use all that ABLE money for education. But the same is not true the other way around. Once it's in a 529 account, you don't have the benefits of the withdrawals not being counted. First of all, they're stuck there. They can only be used for education. They can't be used for well, actually they could be used for housing if it's related to college. But if you have a child who's receiving SSI and going to college, and some do, that payment out of the 529 for housing expenses will reduce their SSI benefit. Whereas if it came out of an ABLE account, it would not. So some of you were wondering, should you do something about the 529 accounts? And the answer is up to 100,000. Yes, you definitely, given the time, should look at transferring that money into ABLE accounts. It gives you and your child more options for how the money is used and not taxed and not interfering with their public benefits. So now I want to talk a little bit about special needs trusts.
Do you want to wait till the end for questions, or do you want to answer questions on these now? Either way works.
If there are questions specific to 529s or education trusts, it would be good we could ask those. I haven't been reading the chat as we were going along.
Yeah, I can, I mean, are the earnings on the ABLE account tax-free?
Are there? Yes. The earnings are tax-free on an ABLE account.
At what age can using an ABLE account funds for education, assistive technology, health, and wellness costs?
Any age.
Okay.
Any age. So, whoever's got the youngest child, you put money in an ABLE account and you need it for something, then you can use it out of the ABLE account.
Oh, okay. That's great information. Good
Yeah.
question. Is a doctor's note sufficient documentation for disability or paperwork from the regional center showing you receive services from them?
My understanding is that a doctor's letter is sufficient for disability, and the person who would need it is the only person who would ask for it is someone from Social Security, who would be asking to make sure that your child still qualifies for SSI.
Okay. If the person receiving passes, does the money then go to the state or to a surviving relative? She heard it went to the state in California.
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up because that lets me talk about something else. And that is the state payback. Medi-Cal, not SSI, but Medi-Cal has the right to be repaid for the medical care that it provides during your child's lifetime. Under current California law, they only take reimbursement when there is a probate, an actual, honest to goodness probate in probate court, where someone files to be the executor, and any of the things that you do to avoid probate, a full probate will avoid the Medi-Cal payback, because it's only in the probate that Medi-Cal files its claim and gets paid back. So, for example, if your child owns something in joint tenancy, state doesn't get paid back because it doesn't go through probate. If there's a beneficiary named, the state doesn't get paid back because it doesn't go through probate. So I'm not talking now specifically about 529s, I'm just talking about general payback. If someone who has Medi-Cal writes a living trust, then it doesn't go through probate. What they have in the trust doesn't go through probate, it avoids payback. There's a limit adjusted for inflation, an amount below which you don't need to do a probate. And that amount is 160, it's adjusted for inflation, so it's a stupid amount, $166,250. So if the person has below 166,250 in their ABLE account when they die, there wouldn't be a probate. And so the state doesn't get paid back and it goes to next of kin.
Okay.
So that's the longer answer, but allows me to tell you about those other payback rules.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. And then the last one, if you open an ABLE account in California, is it possible to move to another state after it's funded?
I don't know for sure the answer to that question. I probably should, but I don't want to give an answer because I'm not certain.
I can email it to you and after this, and if you happen to be able to find an answer, I'll share it with the person who asked the question.
That would be great. That would be great. You could share it with the group because Other people may wonder the same thing.
Okay, and there's actually 2 more questions now. If you create a living trust, can you assign beneficiaries for the ABLE account in that trust?
No, they're separate.
Okay, and if you have a living trust and your child gets everything, car, house, and all of that and such, then the state can't get Medi-Cal payback?
No, that's not accurate. So if you have a living trust and you give everything to your child outright, then your child owns your house and your car and your bank accounts. First of all, the car is fine, the house is fine, but when they own your bank accounts, they're going to be disqualified from their public benefits because they have more than $2,000. The public benefits agencies don't count the car and the house, but they do count bank accounts. When your child then dies, because it's not your child's living trust, as I understand the question, but if your child then dies and doesn't have a living trust, then they have a bunch of things. They have a car and a house and a bank account. That's going to go through probate and the state's going to get paid back. So if your child is competent and they create a living trust, then the state wouldn't get paid back, even if they had $1 million of assets. Your $1 million house, it just has to go through a living trust, and that would avoid the Medi-Cal payback.
Okay. All right. That's it for questions. So continue on.
Okay. So special needs trusts. A special needs trust is a very particular type of trust. And a trust is just generally a situation where one person holds money for somebody else. Many of us are familiar with the situation where we create our own trust. We as trustee hold our money for us. And when we die, someone then takes our money and gives it out in the way that we've described, according to the instructions we've provided. A special needs trust is a very specific subset of that general situation. And the special needs trust is an arrangement where we specify who is going to manage the money for our disabled child. And the trust says the money can only be used for their special needs, not for their general support and maintenance. So that's where it gets the name special needs. If it could be used for their general support and maintenance, then it would be, then the public benefits agencies would say, you don't need our money. You have a trust that provides for your general support and maintenance. So instead, the trust says, don't use it for general support and maintenance. Use it only for all of the things that are not paid by the public benefits. So if the public benefits agency provides some basic housing and some 40 hours of in-home support services per month, then don't use the money in the special needs trust for that. Use it for other things. Use it for additional hours. Use it for trips to Disneyland, recreation, other things, anything, literally anything other than what the public benefits agencies pay for. So it's written by exclusion. First check and see if a public benefit agency pays for it. And if they don't, then you can use the special needs trust. So somebody asked, where do you where do you go and ask for one at the bank? It's not a bank account, it's a trust. So you don't go to the bank to get a special needs trust. You go to an attorney who knows how to draft this particular kind of trust for the benefit of your disabled child. And then, depending on what assets are in this trust, the person in charge of it invests those assets in a way that makes sense. Maybe they buy a condo or a house where your special needs child will reside with caretakers if there's enough caregivers, if there's enough in there. Maybe, you know, you're not blessed with quite that much to be able to give them. And so maybe it will be used for additional hours and some additional attendant care, adaptive equipment. We all know that Medi-Cal doesn't pay for every medical situation that's appropriate. Some of them, they'll say, well, those are still experimental. Like, yeah, it's 25 years everybody else has been experimenting on those, and they've all decided that they're pretty adequate. But that's just their way of eliminating things they don't want to pay for. But you know, you can ask, and if Medi-Cal says no, we won't pay for it, then the special needs trust can pay for it. So the trustee manages the assets for the benefit of the disabled beneficiary, usually for their lifetime, without overlapping the public benefits for which they're entitled. That allows your children to continue to receive their public benefits while still having the special needs trust to pay for other things. Somebody mentioned the possibility of an inheritance. If there's going to be an inheritance, if you think that your children might receive an inheritance from a relative, it's a great idea to have a special needs trust set up. And then you tell people, whatever you do, don't give money directly to my child, give it to my child's special needs trust dated such and such a date, and change all of your wills and your IRAs and your life insurance policies to make sure that no money goes directly to my child, but instead goes to their special needs trust, so that it's not considered an asset of theirs for public benefits, so they can continue receiving their public benefits. We refer to it as a third party special needs trust. I know this is getting into the weeds, but you hear these things. You hear first party special needs trusts and third party special needs trusts, and sometimes you have to pay back the state and other times you don't. And how is somebody to know the difference? A third party, that a special needs trust that's set up by somebody other than your child.
Don't need all those trips.
What is a third party special needs trust? That means somebody other than your child set it up. When your child inherits money and it's their money, and somebody realizes after the fact, oh no, this is going to mess up their benefits, there's a way to go to court and take that money they've inherited and put it into a special needs trust. That has to have different provisions in it, and that's called a first party because it's theirs, belongs to them, it's their money, first party special needs trust. But I'm talking now about the idea that you might create a special needs trust for your children, and so those are called third party, somebody else setting up a special needs trust for your children. And the expenditures that you can make from a special needs trust are virtually unlimited, except that you cannot duplicate what what they receive in public benefits. There's no limit on the amounts that can be contributed to a special needs trust. I have some that have $5 million or more. Very wealthy parents, but they wanted to make sure that their children, that they weren't, $5 million. What are the chances that you spend $5 million in medical expenses? Not that hard. So it seems like a lot of money, but you could reach that limit if you didn't have Medi-Cal. So parents don't necessarily want to duplicate Medi-Cal payments. So it may be created during the parent's lifetime by the parents to serve as the beneficiary for gifts that other family members are going to make, or it can be something that just comes into existence when the parents pass away. And the trust would name who's going to receive whatever's left after the death of your disabled children. And it can coexist with an ABLE account. So one of the best things you can do with a special needs trust, if you don't have other people doing it, is take $15,000 per year from the special needs trust and fund an ABLE account. And the reason for that is there are some because ABLE accounts get very beneficial treatment under the disability, especially under the SSI laws. Nothing coming from the ABLE account reduces public benefits or reduces SSI. A payment out of a special needs trust for housing expense will reduce the SSI amount because that is what they consider in-kind support and maintenance. So it may reduce the benefit, but it might be worth it. If you were to pay $1,800 a month for your child to have their own apartment, and it reduces their SSI by $350 a month, you might say that's worth it because I don't want them in a group home and they don't want to be in a group home and they're sufficiently able to manage on their own that they don't need to be in a group home. So if you have sufficient funds in the special needs trust, that's a distribution that the person in charge of that trust would say that one makes sense, even though it's going to slightly reduce the SSI. That's a payment we want made. If the special needs trust takes $15,000 per year and puts it in an ABLE account, that rent can come out of the ABLE account and it doesn't reduce SSI. So that ABLE account gets even better treatment than the special needs trust. So that's why it makes sense to fund that ABLE account from a special needs trust. So I know that might be hard to follow, but it makes sense to fully fund the ABLE account. But because there are limits on how much you can put in the ABLE account, only $15,000 per year, if you pass away, you can't put the rest of your assets or the share that you wanted to go to your child all into an ABLE account at once. And so you would need a special needs trust to hold that money for your disabled child. So the contribution limits, no contribution limits for a special needs trust, no maximum value on a special needs trust. remember that this is a setup where someone else is managing the money for the benefit of your special needs child. So you want to give very, very careful thought to who is going to be in the position of managing that money and making the decisions and interacting with your child about when they need money, how much they need. And that's going to depend on, you know, who's in your family, what the nature of your child is. Are they demanding? Are they easygoing? Are they hard to work with? Are they easy to work with? One of the most common things is parents say, I'll name their sibling. They're closest in age. So, you know, if they're 25 and 35 or something like that, you know, it can go on for the longest period of time. And while that's true, the problem in naming a sibling is that you're creating a dynamic between the siblings around money, where one has to be the person who sometimes says, no, I can't give you that. And your special needs child is put in the position of having to always go to the sibling to ask for things relating to money. And that can be very negative to their relationship. I think of it as, are they on the same side? You want them on the same side of everything, and not, you know, on opposite sides of this issue around money. And sometimes it's a matter of the trustee would want to say yes, but there's simply not enough money to say yes to everything. And sometimes the public benefits rules don't allow the trustee to say yes to everything. That's something that the trustee simply can't distribute without losing benefits or losing too much in the way of benefits. So, and then I have this other note that you do not want to name your special needs child as beneficiary on your retirement accounts or on your insurance, because then they're going to receive money directly. They're going to have more than $2,000 and they're going to lose their benefits. So if you have a special needs trust, you should name the special needs trust as beneficiary on all of those policies. And then just to like really blow your mind a little bit, there's a change to the law relating to retirement accounts. Many of you know that you can name a beneficiary of your retirement accounts. And the more you get into the weeds of that, people have had a sense that over the years that those beneficiaries could take it out over their lifetime, could withdraw the money in their 401k and their IRAs for the rest of their lifetime. That changed in December, when we were all sleeping. In December of 2019, the Secure Act passed and changed the withdrawal rules relating to IRAs. And now, unless it's a spouse, the rules say your beneficiaries have to take it out in 10 years. So I have some clients who have like $2 million IRAs. And so that means their beneficiaries are going to have to take it out at a clip of $200,000 a year. That's a humongous amount of tax, and it's all income tax. So instead of taking it out over their kid's lifetime, they have to take it out in 10 years. There's an exception, a very strong lobby. It used to be the worst lobby in the world, and now it's a strong lobby, and that's the lobby for disabled children. The exception is if the beneficiary of the retirement is disabled or is a special needs trust, then they can take it out over their entire lifetime. So naming your special needs trust as a beneficiary of your retirement account is the best thing, is the best way to fund the special needs trust, because none of the other kids can get as good a benefit from it as your special needs child can. So that's kind of an inside tip. So I see there are some more questions popping up in the chat, and that's good because.
Would you like me to read them off to you?
Yes, it looks like I'm going to them now. Okay, can able be part of the trust or are they separate? They are separate. And so that is why the beneficiary of the able account wouldn't necessarily be the beneficiary of the people that you've named as beneficiary of the special needs trust. Because they're completely separate. So I mentioned that the trust can come into existence when the parents pass on. Is there an advantage to funding a special needs trust before you pass on? Yes, absolutely. The advantage to funding a special needs trust, even if you create it and fund it with a fictional $10 bill, is that it exists, it has a name, and you can make it the beneficiary of your retirement accounts, and you can tell other family members like your parents, your grandparents, please do us a favor. If you were going to name Joey as a beneficiary of for anything, please name Joey's Special Needs Trust dated 1/1/01 as the beneficiary, because we've created a special trust for Joey to make sure that Joey gets the benefit of all that money and continues to receive public benefits. If the trust is only going to come into existence when you and your spouse pass away, then it doesn't, by definition, it doesn't exist. And so Joey is going to could inherit from other people, and that could mess up Joey's benefits. And then the question, do colleges look at ABLE accounts when determining student financial aid ability? That is too new to answer the question. It's not on the financial aid eligibility radar. We know that 529 accounts are counted, so I would hazard a guess that they consider them, but there's no, that's a really good question. There's nothing yet out about that. And so then Carrie asks, where does the special needs trust money live when it's not an ABLE account? Once the special needs trust is created, and presuming it has more than $10, let's say it's funded and somebody makes a gift to it of $30,000. The trustee, the person in charge of that special needs trust, decides where to put the money. And their job as trustee is to make reasonable decisions about how to invest it. And what would be reasonable would be different if it were $30,000 than if it were $300,000. So if it were $30,000, it might be reasonable to leave it in a savings account Whereas if it were $300,000, it would probably make more sense that it be in some sort of investment account where it's widely diversified in mutual funds or other, other types of investments. So Janet asks if, and I'm guessing, so Janet's question is, if you have two children and one has extra needs, am I saying don't put both children on as beneficiaries and just put the one child with extra needs? And I'm presuming she means on as the beneficiary of the retirement accounts. And what I'm saying is, if you did a financial, if you named, you want everything to be equal, and this is the challenge. You want everything to be equal, and so your mind draws you to, it will be equal if I name the two kids to receive all of my accounts equally, the house equally, and my retirement accounts equally. And the bottom line is they don't get it equally, because your child who doesn't have extra needs has to take out that retirement account within 10 years and be taxed on it. So they'll be taxed on it as they take it out in 10 years. But your child who has extra needs has their whole lifetime to take it out. So they can take it out in smaller increments. So they're going to be taxed less because they're going to be at the lowest tax bracket. Whereas if it's all condensed, the one who has to take it out within 10 years could potentially be paying at a higher tax rate. So it doesn't necessarily come out equal, depending on how much is in the retirement account. So working with the financial planner, you may say, gee, my plan works best if I take my retirement account and make my special needs child the only beneficiary of my retirement account, or make the special needs trust the only beneficiary of my retirement account, and make my child who doesn't have special needs a beneficiary of my trust in an equal amount, where they get money not subject to tax, which itself is not exactly equal, but maybe that's a little closer to equal, and then they split the rest. Because they're taxed on it differently. So I think anytime you're doing your financial planning, you want to take into account how do the taxes impact what the children are actually receiving. And there aren't that many situations where they're actually being taxed differently and significantly differently.
Okay, it looks like there's just one more question. Can a parent be the trustee for a special needs trust, or does it need to be someone else?
The parent can be the trustee for the special needs trust, and particularly if it's a special needs trust that's created while the parent is still alive, it makes sense that the parent would be the trustee. One of the requirements in a special needs trust is that it can't be changed. It can't be accessible by the special needs beneficiary. The special needs beneficiary can't revoke it. They can't amend it. They can't demand the money from it. So historically, people tend to think of special needs trusts as trusts that across the board can't be revoked. So they say they're irrevocable trusts. That's not actually true. It's just that they can't be revoked by the special needs beneficiary. So if you're creating a trust during your lifetime for your special needs beneficiary, your special needs child, you could still have the right to change that trust during your lifetime. And I would recommend that that makes sense, because just like you have a living trust and you retain the right to change who inherits and in what percentages for the rest of your lifetime, and who the alternate beneficiaries are, which of those nieces and nephews are being little snits and don't deserve it. You want the same ability to make those changes to that special needs trust. And I see too many where people want to change something about the special needs trust, and it's been made so that it's irrevocable, and there's no reason it needed to be.
Okay. I think that is it. I found this information to be super helpful. If anybody else has any other question, go ahead and put it in the chat now. Otherwise, we will let Tricia enjoy some wine and a quiet night at her house. Yeah, so everybody is saying thank you and super helpful. There's just so much to know in this special needs life that we're living, that having somebody, as I was telling you before, that we can trust to give us the information that is just so wonderful. So thank you, Tricia, for donating your time. I will send you an email, and then I will post it in the group with all of your information, with how people can get in touch with you. I did record this session. Is it okay if I share this recording in our group?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful.
I was going to convert my, what I'll do is I'll convert my, for what good it is. I don't know that my slides are that helpful, but I can make it into a PDF and send it to you, Larkin, and you're welcome to send it out to everyone.
Thank you so much. That is super helpful. We really appreciate it, and enjoy your evening.
All right, well, I will. And it was wonderful to meet you all, and enjoy your evening, and best of success to you and all your wonderful children.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a good evening.
All right. Bye.
Bye.